It has sometimes been pointed out in minimizing the importance or even the existence of the Bermuda Triangle that it is not truly a mystery at all, in that, since ships and planes are lost all over the world, a triangle projected over any group of important sea lanes would indicate a disturbing incidence of loss if the triangle were made large enough. Moreover, the ocean is large, planes and ships relatively small, and the ocean is perpetually in motion, with both surface and submarine currents. Planes or small boats lost between the Bahamas and Florida, where the Gulf Stream flows north at more than 4 knots an hour, could end up at such a distance from the point where they were last reported that they would seem to have effectively disappeared. The speed of this current is, however, well known to the Coast Guard, whose search and rescue missions take into account current and wind deviations in the approximate area where a craft has disappeared. The radius immediately given for complete circular search for a large vessel is 5 miles, with 10 miles for a plane and 15 miles for a small boat, with other overlapping radial searches applied thereafter according to direction, current, wind, and drift. Some ships have even sunk and then resurfaced at another place, as did the A. Ernest Miles, which sank with a cargo of salt off the Carolina coast. When the salt melted, the ghost ship came to the surface again, where it was subsequently found. Another ghost or derelict ship, the La Dahama, that rose from the deep sea is one frequently mentioned with reference to the triangle, as it was reported sunk in April 1935, and its passengers were rescued by the SS Rex, but sometime later, the Aztec found her adrift off Bermuda. The crew of the Aztec did not know that the ship had previously been sunk and its passengers rescued, and considered La Dahama to be a derelict mystery ship until the news came from the Rex, now back at its home port in Italy. Why the ship rose is still a mystery. Wreckage of lost ships and planes on the seafloor, moreover, can easily vanish into ocean quicksands, or can be covered up by storms, or eventually be uncovered by other storms until rediscovered by submarines or divers. Mel Fisher, a longtime diver and salvor, one engaged in salvaging ships or cargoes, has been engaged for some years in underwater exploration on the continental shelf within the Triangle area in the Atlantic and Caribbean. While occupied in his search for Spanish gold, of which he has amassed a great quantity, he has made other surprising finds on the sea bottom, which were evidently widely searched for at the time of their loss, but later forgotten. These metal concentrations are picked up by a magnetometer, a 1,000-fold intensity compass which indicates the location of undersea metal, a property that has often directed Fisher to relics other than the Spanish treasure ships he is usually searching for. It is important to note that the improved magnetometer was not in use at the time of many of the disappearances within the Bermuda Triangle. When divers descend to the ocean floor following the magnetometer's indications, it often happens that, instead of Spanish galleons, they find lost fighter or private planes, various kinds of ships, and once several miles offshore, a railway locomotive, which Fisher left on the bottom for marine archaeologists of the future. Mel Fisher is of the opinion that some, among the many disappearances in the Florida-Bahamas area, have been caused by unexploded bombs from Air Force bomb runs, live torpedoes or floating mines from past wars or present combat training exercises. On one occasion, diving in the vicinity of a Spanish treasure ship, he started to bring to the surface what he thought was an antique Spanish cannon when he noticed that the barnacle-encrusted artifact had a pointed end, indicating that it was a bomb, and a live one. From the number of unidentified wrecks he has noticed at the bottom as he pursues his quest for the special wrecks he is seeking, 2 Spanish treasure galleons, La Margarita and Santa Maria de Atocha, containing treasure estimated as worth from $400,000 to $600,000, Fisher concludes that hundreds of ships have crashed on the reefs during storms and that many have been buried in the offshore sands. Even to reach some of the treasure ships he has already found, it has been necessary, once metal has been indicated by the magnetometer, to excavate under the sea bottom in order to reach them. He observes that quicksands exist where the Gulf Stream flows past the end of Florida, and these quicksands have been noted to swallow fairly large boats which became stuck in the sandy bottom. Vagaries of currents and the shifting bottom might then be responsible for some of the unsuccessful searches for lost ships and planes. But there are other underwater features in the area which may also have been responsible for hiding the evidence of some of the disappearances.
These are the unusual blue holes scattered between the limestone cliffs and other underwater limestone formations throughout the Bahamas with the wide banks and abyssal drop-offs. Thousands of years ago, these holes were limestone caves, then above water, but when the waters rose as the result of the melting of the third glaciation, perhaps 12 to 15,000 years ago, the caves became the blue holes, a favorite haunt of fish and, recently, of adventuresome scuba divers. These limestone caves and passageways go right to the edge of the continental shelf, and some continue down through the whole limestone formation to a depth of 1,500 feet, and others are connected through underwater passageways and caves with inland lakes and ponds on the larger Bahama Islands. Although miles away from the sea, these smaller bodies of water raise and lower their levels with the tides of the ocean. Ocean fish, transported by underwater currents in this submarine system, suddenly appear miles inland. A 20-foot shark made a sensational appearance in one of these quiet inland pools 20 miles from the shore, creating great agitation among the local inhabitants accustomed to swimming in their peaceful pond. The blue holes within the ocean are located at various distances from the surface. Divers entering these underwater holes notice that cave chambers branch off from the passages they are following, exactly as is the case with cave formations on land. The passageways seem to go off in many directions, evidently confusing even the fish, which often swim upside down. Some of the passages between the caves seem to be so regularly formed that divers have looked for chisel marks to see if they were hand-cut at a time when the limestone cliffs were above sea level. Divers have noticed the dangerously strong currents flowing inside the blue holes. This is due to the tidal flow, which causes masses of water to enter the holes, creating a funnel effect with strong whirlpools on the surface, even though there is no land above water in the vicinity. Such a whirlpool could possibly drag a small boat down underwater into a blue hole, together with its crew. This possibility was given a certain credibility when the oceanographer Jim Thorne, on a diving expedition, found a fishing boat wedged deep within one of the blue holes at a depth of 80 feet. Dinghies and small craft have also been found by others at 65 feet and lesser depths within the holes. But while some small boats and perhaps wreckage of larger boats may have ended up within the blue holes and may still be there, certainly this whirlpool effect would not explain the disappearance of ships and certainly not of planes. Although whirlpools appear in various parts of the world's oceans at various times, and notably within the Bahamas area of the Bermuda Triangle, none of the known phenomena, except perhaps major seismic or atmospheric disturbances, could be compared with the oceanic whirlpool off Norway, described by Edgar Allan Poe in his A Descent into the Maelstrom. Speaking of this ship-destroying whirlpool from a point on its vast inclined and revolving wall, the narrator says, "Never shall I forget the sensations of awe, horror, and admiration with which I gazed about me. The boat appeared to be hanging, as if by magic, midway down upon the interior surface of a tunnel vast in circumference, prodigious in depth, and whose perfectly smooth sides might have been mistaken for ebony, but for the bewildering rapidity with which they spun around. As I felt the sickening sweep of the descent, I had instinctively tightened my hold and closed my eyes. Now looking about me upon the wide waste on which we were thus borne, I perceived that our boat was not the only object in the embrace of the world. Both above us and below us were visible fragments of vessels, large masses of building timber and trunks of trees, with many smaller articles such as pieces of household furniture, broken boxes, barrels and staves. I now began to watch with a strange interest the numerous things that floated in our company. This fir tree, I found myself at one time saying, will certainly be the next thing that takes the awful plunge and disappears. And then I was disappointed to find that the wreck of a Dutch merchant ship overtook it and went down."
Such writings may have influenced some of the theories concerning ships disappearing in the triangle, as well as the shape of the gulfs that wash us down at sea. A more likely doom for small and even larger boats in the area would be sudden tidal waves or even waterspouts, the seagoing tornadoes which occur at certain seasons and which raise a vast funnel of water to a great height in the sky. A waterspout, or several of them, might well tear apart a small boat or a low-flying plane in the same way that tornadoes on land tear apart or carry houses, fences, vehicles, and people into the sky. Moreover, while waterspouts can be seen during the day when there is time to take evasive action, they are considerably more difficult to avoid at night, especially by a plane flying in low-visibility weather. but by far the greatest suspects with regard to sudden sinking of ships are unexpected tidal waves, usually resulting from underwater earthquakes. The creation of large waves depends on various factors: underwater earthquakes and landslides, atmospheric pressure, winds, storms, and hurricanes, not necessarily in the immediate area, or eruptions of undersea volcanoes. Huge waves can appear from a variety of causes in a calm sea, while waves in a rough sea have been estimated by competent observers to reach a height of at least 112 feet, USS Ramapo, February 6, 1963. The huge waves caused by seismic disturbances, tsunamis, have been known to reach skyscraper heights of 200 feet. These tsunamis can happen without warning and can easily sink a ship if the ship is anchored or capsize it if it is underway. Not only do ships capsize when struck by these waves, but sometimes even a large ship will break in half from the effects of tension, depending on how it is facing the waves and how far the troughs are apart between the waves. While smaller ships may ride over the crests of the waves and down into the troughs without difficulty, this fate overtook a destroyer, which was broken in two by great waves over which it extended a trough and a half, although it probably would have survived if its length had measured one or two of the temporary troughs. There also exist other very destructive and unusual seiche waves, usually the product of underwater landslides caused by the pulling apart of a fault in the Earth's crust. The seiche waves, smaller in height, are not as sensational looking as the tsunamis, but they are immensely powerful, with great tides of water built up behind them. They are harder to recognize as they approach, and they are therefore even more dangerous to ships. Such a wave, suddenly arriving without previous warning, could smash a ship and spread its wreckage over long distances, losing pieces of it as it traveled. If ships can literally be swallowed by a sudden tremendous sea, is it equally possible for planes to disappear in the air? Planes have been seen by reliable observers to fly into a cloud but never fly out again, as if something had disintegrated them or snatched them out of the air during flight. Stresses exist in the atmosphere that can be roughly compared with tidal waves, especially if a plane heads into them at a high rate of speed. Also, as there are often winds at different altitude levels, an ascending or descending plane can frequently encounter strong winds coming from a different direction than that indicated by the windsock at the airport.
If the intervening winds are strong enough, this can often have unfortunate results for the plane concerned. This wind shear factor is an important element in air losses, and in its intensified form of CAT, clear air turbulence, it can be compared to the seiche waves that unexpectedly occur in an otherwise calm sea. The turbulence may be going either up or down, or in a different horizontal direction, and when the change is rapid enough, either through the force of CAT or the speed of the plane, the effect is almost like flying into a stone wall. Generally speaking, CAT cannot be predicted, although it is generally encountered at the edge of the jet stream, the air current that moves through the skies above the Earth much as the Gulf Stream moves through the ocean, but with considerably more speed, 200 knots per hour, as compared with the Gulf Stream's 4 knots or less. CAT could possibly explain the loss of some of the light planes in the Bermuda Triangle, tearing them apart according to the amount of pressure exerted, the G factor, or suddenly forming a vacuum and dropping the plane into the sea. CAT itself is a mystery, as it appears suddenly, if one can use the word appear for an invisible phenomenon, and it is unpredictable. Nevertheless, it is doubtful that sudden pressure change could have been the reason for all of the many planes lost in the triangle, and could have knocked out their radio communications as well. Planes that disappear in the area in the future might be easier to find because of new sophisticated tracking and memory systems, which, if they had been carried by many of the lost planes, might have enabled them to be found if they still existed. The aircraft of today also carry computerized memory systems called AIDS, Airborne Integrated Data Systems, which, if found, would preserve a record of what happened to the plane. It is now possible to audit and record at the base everything said in the cockpit of commercial and other aircraft. One remembers, however, that the conversations between the pilots on the planes of Flight 19 were heard at the base without shedding any light on what was happening.
There are also systems in use, developed through the Mercury spaceflight and atomic submarines, which automatically record the position and any deviation of a plane or ship. A new device for locating a lost plane is called the crash or recovery beacon. It is a small radio transmitter capable of transmitting for 2 or 3 days. It is located in the tail of the plane and is activated by the loss of the electronic system. But again, if disasters in the triangle are connected with radio blackouts, one supposes that, in such a case, these new devices would also be neutralized. Electromagnetism and the malfunction of instruments are recurring elements in the mystery of the triangle. Hugh Auchincloss Brown, an electrical engineer and the author of Cataclysms of the Earth, is of the opinion that
he stated that he had found specific locations which he referred to as areas of reduced binding, relatively small in area, about 1,000 feet in diameter, but extending upward to a considerable height, which were in effect so turbulent that they could tear planes apart. Planes would therefore not have advanced notice of these invisible and uncharted areas of magnetic and gravitational malfunction until they flew into them, with fatal effects. Smith wrote, in commenting on the seeming impermanence of these locations, "We do not know if the regions of reduced binding move about or just fade away. When we looked for several of them after 3 or 4 months, we could find no trace of them." A spokesman for the Search and Rescue Branch, Coast Guard headquarters, has also specified the importance of magnetism and gravity in the investigations. Quite frankly, we don't know what is happening in the so-called Bermuda Triangle. All we can do about these unexplainable disappearances is speculate. The Navy is trying to get to the bottom of the mystery with a project called Project Magnetism, in which they're investigating electromagnetic gravitation and atmospheric disturbances. Some experts think that some such disturbance might have disintegrated those planes in 1945. A ship in the area reported sighting a large ball of fire in the skies, which, of course, could have also meant a mid-air collision, but that's an unlikely event among 5 planes. The fact is, we have no real opinions. The 7th Coast Guard District, the closest district to the Triangle, in a form letter previously referred to, takes the point of view that the Bermuda or Devil's Triangle is an imaginary area, which is noted for a high incidence of unexplained losses of ships, small boats, and aircraft. The apexes of the triangle are generally accepted to be Bermuda, Miami, Florida, and San Juan, Puerto Rico. In the past, extensive but futile Coast Guard searches prompted by search and rescue cases, such as the disappearance of an entire squadron of TBM Avengers shortly after takeoff from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, or the traceless sinking of the Sulphur in the Florida Straits, have lent credence to the popular belief in the mystery and the supernatural qualities of the Bermuda Triangle. Countless theories attempting to explain the many disappearances have been offered throughout the history of the area. The most practical seem to be environmental and those citing human error. The majority of disappearances can be attributed to the area's unique environmental features. First, the Devil's Triangle is one of the 2 places on Earth that a magnetic compass does point toward true north. Normally, it points toward magnetic north. The difference between the two is known as compass variation. The amount of variation changes by as much as 20 degrees as one circumnavigates the Earth, and if this compass variation or error is not compensated for, a navigator could find himself far off course and in deep trouble. An area called the Devil's Sea by Japanese and Filipino seamen, located off the east coast of Japan, also exhibits the same magnetic characteristics. As the Bermuda Triangle, it is known for its mysterious disappearances. Another environmental factor is the character of the Gulf Stream. It is extremely swift and turbulent and can quickly erase any evidence of a disaster. The unpredictable Caribbean-Atlantic weather pattern also plays its role. Sudden local thunderstorms and waterspouts often spell disaster for pilots and mariners. And finally, the topography of the ocean floor varies from extensive shoals around the islands to some of the deepest marine trenches in the world. With the interaction of the strong currents over the many reefs, the topography is in a state of constant flux, and the development of new navigational hazards is swift. Not to be underestimated is the human error factor. A large number of pleasure boats travel the waters between Florida's Gold Coast and the Bahamas. All too often, crossings are attempted with too small a boat, insufficient knowledge of the area's hazards, and a lack of good seamanship. The Coast Guard, in short, is not impressed with supernatural explanations of disasters at sea. It has been our experience that the combined forces of nature and the unpredictability of mankind outdo even the most far-fetched science fiction many times each year. Almost as an afterthought, the letter offers a brief bibliography where the reader is referred to articles by Ivan Sanderson, Leslie Litcher, Vincent Gaddis, and John Wallace Spencer as a sort of equal time to those who believe that the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle is not so easily explained. In the last paragraph of the Coast Guard letter, it is mentioned that we know of no maps that delineate the boundaries of the Bermuda Triangle, although it adds that among the aeromagnetic charts of the U.S. coastal region, HO Series 17507, numbers 9 through 15 cover the Bermuda Triangle.
Some civilian airline executives in the area are in cautious agreement with the Coast Guard opinion. Mrs. Atlee Gamber, president of Red Aircraft in Fort Lauderdale, is one example. Atlee Gamber, an attractive brunette and a charming example of a vital, successful woman executive, is the widow of a pilot who disappeared on a flight between Fort Lauderdale and the Bahamas. She has been on the airfield during many search operations for missing planes and has had both motive and opportunity to speculate about the many private planes that have disappeared without trace within the triangle. Mrs. Gamber, from her observation point in the area, does not believe there is anything mysteriously sinister about the Bermuda Triangle. She is of the opinion that the reason that many pilots have not sent a Mayday or SOS was that they had no idea that they were in trouble, adding that the moment you get in worse condition, the radar is discontinued. She observes, this area is characterized by a rapid development of an almost spontaneous low. An aircraft is built for a certain shear load. After that, it will come apart. She adds, I am more convinced than ever that human nature cannot cope with the elements. She estimated that pilot error is responsible for as much as 50% of the disappearances, and of the many private planes that have vanished, 25% have simply run out of gas. But the commercial, passenger, and military planes that disappear on normal runs with constant checking by experienced pilots and flight personnel certainly did not run out of gas. Nor did the planes that vanished in groups all hit clear air disturbances at exactly the same time and at the same pressure. Nor does there exist a believable explanation as to why nothing, in contrast with what happens in other parts of the world's oceans and shores, has ever been found from so many losses, or why they vanished so abruptly from the sky. Again, what is applicable to aircraft is not applicable to ships, and if all of the air losses could be explained away, the ship losses in the Bermuda Triangle would remain as mysterious as ever. To the observer, there appears to be an obvious correlation, at least in intensity, between the two types of losses, and each satisfactory explanation seems to bring with it one or several more questions, somewhat similar to the Hydra, a multi-headed monster of another, more ancient myth, which, according to Greek legend, as soon as one head was cut off, was capable of growing another, a source of considerable dismay to its adversaries. Widespread interest in the mythos of the Bermuda Triangle has increasingly preoccupied the imagination of dwellers on the adjoining shores as each new case is reported and discussed. Because of the frequent disappearances of small boats and planes, which could disappear from numerous other causes, there is no way to ascribe the disappearances to suspected forces in the triangle, although they are generally associated with them in the public mind. Roby Yone, a leading Miami disc jockey and radio commentator, is an example of to what degree this mystery has intrigued observers in southern Florida. Since he expressed his interest in the Bermuda Triangle, he has received literally thousands of calls, most of them while he was on the air, from listeners who have stories to tell or want more information. He is presently interested in the manning of a launch equipped with sending and control apparatus and with bugged dummies aboard, with the intention of setting it adrift between Florida and the Bahamas within the inner area of the triangle and observing what happens to it through remote electronic control. The desire to solve this mystery by personal search and involvement has extended much further north. In the latter part of 1974, an organization bearing the name of the ISIS Center for Research and Study of the Esoteric Arts and Sciences of Silver Spring, Maryland, will conduct a Frontiers of Science seminar cruise by chartered ship of the areas of the Bermuda Triangle where the most unusual and potentially dangerous phenomena have been recorded.
According to ISIS President Gene Bird, participants in the cruise will be required to take out special insurance because of the implied element of danger. In addition, it is planned to run psychological tests on members as they cruise through the danger areas, especially those where unusual compass activity or lack of function gives signs of magnetic deviation, to determine whether the mental states of the participants reflect the magnetic stress. This possibility has sometimes been previously mentioned as an explanation whereby persons mentally affected by strong magnetic currents would lose control of planes or ships, causing them to crash or founder, or they would simply abandon ship under psychological stress. It must be pointed out, however, that the survivors who claim to have encountered the yet unidentifiable forces present in the triangle do not remember noting any mental aberration except the understandable ones of surprise, fear, extreme concern, and future caution. Lacking a logical and readily acceptable explanation, independent researchers concerned with the disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle have gone even farther afield, some to explanations based on exceptions to natural law, others to suggestions of interdimensional changeover through a passageway equivalent to a hole in the sky, which aircraft can enter but not leave. Others believe the disappearances are engineered by entities from inner or outer space, while still others offer a theory or combinations of theories that the phenomenon may be essentially caused by still functioning man-made power complexes belonging to a science considerably older than and very different from ours.